Hey, what's going on out there, my work from home family? I was watching a video earlier from a guy named Fads. I'll link his page in the description in the video that I was watching. But very good video, great topic. The topic was at war against remote workers, which we constantly face some kind of war on our front. But this one was pretty interesting. So he kind of broke down different reasons why and how corporations are going at war against us. We're family. Of course, I'm going to say us, but a very good topic. So what I wanted to do was react to what he was talking about. I manage a lot of work from home employees. I've been doing it for several years now. So I've seen a lot of the ins and outs. So that's the main thing of this channel is going to be to share insight, points, tips. If you want to break into the work from home world, or if you're already in it, I'll give you points for both. Just sharing my experience and knowledge that I've gained over the years with all of you. Hopefully you find it useful. But this video really caught my attention. So what I'm going to do is react to it, and I give my feedback and opinion as I watch the video. Look forward to a lot more videos coming your way. I'm going to be dropping a lot of jewels for the work from home tribe. Lots of topics of discussion. I've got a long list of things I want to talk about, but definitely things that you should find useful. And I'd like to communicate with you as well. So this is going to be a whole community that I hope to build for more work from home employees where we can talk about things. This will be our break room conversations. This will be the water cooler talk like they used to say back in the day. But let's jump into this video so we can hear what Fabs has to say. All right, again, so I'll link this in the description so you guys can take a look at it. He's got a great channel. This was a phenomenal video. First time seeing this guy, so I'll definitely have to follow him. Of course, I subscribe, which you should as well. Like this video so more of our tribe members can see this video. I'm going to be dropping a lot of good content. But let's take a look here. This is declaring war on the work from home workers, which is us. So let's see what this is all about, guys.
Remote work is profitable. At least that's true according to a survey by Boston Consulting Group, who looked at over 500 companies who employed a collective 26.7 million people. And companies that implemented remote work policies saw on average 4 times greater growth compared to companies that forced in-office working.
Now see, I'm going to stop this right here. This is firm proof that the work from home model does in fact work. I hear so many people saying that everyone should have to go back to the office and this and that is not true. And I'm sure most of you can attest, I am so much more efficient, work so much better from home. And this is hard proof. He's giving us stats to back up his claims. Like, look at this, fully flexible work schedule. Grow revenue faster. So companies are growing revenue almost 25% faster with a remote workforce versus not remote. So the inflexible companies are not making any money, but those who have remote employees are making money. So there's a financial gain to this. It's just better across the board for everyone. It's better for the company. It's better for us as employees. It's better for morale across the board. I don't understand why some people just do not see the logic why working remotely is a benefit to everyone. I just don't get it.
And yet, you might have noticed that despite these seemingly quite shocking headline figures, companies are moving rapidly in the other direction as of late.
Facts.
More and more corporations have been announcing return to office orders, including Amazon most recently, which told its workers that they would have to come in.
Now look at that. They're telling the workers 5 days a week. So this is, me personally, I've got some friends who work in the industry. I work in the technology industry. And a lot of my friends are telling me that they're either getting hybrid requests, which means that they have to work in the office 2 days a week and then 2 days they're remote, or no remote work at all, which is crazy, especially in the technology field. But companies are more and more these days are bringing people back into the office, and it's kind of scary. Between you and I've been working remote for about 8 years now. So if my company told me I had to go back to the office, it'd be a major shock to my system. My morale would bottom out instantly. I'd be pretty stressed about it because I don't know about you, but I really enjoy working from home. And I think the commute, working in the office, the whole 9 to 5 thing, my stress level would go through the roof. And I'm not looking for that at all.
5 days a week. This was incredibly unpopular with its staff. What's maybe even more surprising is that around 80% of CEOs expect a full return to office within the next 3 years. This isn't just a private sector thing. The Canadian government recently announced a mandate requiring all federal workers to be in the office at least 3 days a week.
So they're going to a hybrid schedule, which is what I was just talking about. Thankfully my company is 100% remote, But not everyone has that option. There's some companies that have a huge footprint in the local market, which means they've got a skyscraper or they've got several locations. But man, I just do not get it, guys. I don't get it at all.
It was met with great resistance, and yet they, much like these private companies, decided to go ahead with the change. And yet, corporations are not stupid, right? Despite the fact that this seems like it's obviously a bad move, there is some logic here. And there are some reasons why governments and private companies alike seem to be following this same policy. I think a great place to start is with Amazon, because they announced their return to office in this letter by the CEO, Andy Jassy. And this letter tells us actually quite a lot about the reasons behind it. We're going to try and translate from CEO into English. In this letter, there is one word that appears.
Because there's always double language when you're talking about leadership. They speak one way, and it leaves you wondering, like, okay, what does that mean? So he's going to break it down for us.
Yes, time and time again. Culture. It appears like 11 times and is cited frequently as the reason behind implementing this change. Culture is one of those words that's like pretty loosely defined and quite open to interpretation. In terms of how Amazon CEO defines culture, he mentioned things like scrappiness and being joined at the hip with your teammates.
Like, how outdated is that language? Scrappiness for a culture? Come on, like that, strapped at the hip with your teammates. Like, you can do that virtually as well. I feel just as connected to my coworkers virtually as I did in the office. It really depends on the person and the team. So I encourage my employees to act the same way as they would in person. It's the vibe that you put out in the teams can be the exact same vibe you have in the office for most folks. Of course, some people feel the opposite, but I encourage that on my teams.
Which is probably closer than I want to get to most people. But specifically, I want to focus on this one word, frugality. Because remote work isn't just good for growth, it obviously can lead to millions and potentially billions in cost savings. And you would expect a company which is as frugal as Amazon to consider the fact that half of US workers would actually accept a pay cut for remote work.
Now that's huge. Half of Americans would take a pay cut to work remotely. Like that says it all. Half of Americans would take a pay cut. Like, why can't this sink in? It's the math backs it up. The facts backs it up. It's such a benefit to everyone. Of course, it always boils down to money, though. Money is at the heart of it all.
And yet, rather than do that, they would rather force them back into the office. And they actually ran a proper academic study to measure whether the impact of working from home was positive or negative on their company. And the things they found were that working from home led to a 13% performance increase.
Boom, right there, 13% increase. I know me personally, my performance probably increased by about 25% at least. At least. You're so much more productive working from home.
Largely due to people taking fewer sick days if they were.
Now, this is key. I'm going to do a future video about this, the time off thing. Some companies are doing universal time off, which is what my company does. But you do take less time. There's a mental thing to that. So I'm going to do a future video about time off and what it means working remotely and all that stuff. Very interesting point there.
Working remote. The firm also saved around $2,000 per employee per year. And workers showed improved satisfaction and lower turnover, meaning they were less likely to quit and they were more likely to.
Like, less likely to quit. It's all positives. Every point is a positive point.
To enjoy their job while they were there. When a company that has 100 times as much to gain from just checking doesn't mention any of the numbers, it seems to almost imply that it's like just vibes, right? Was this decision made just based on vibes? Well, if you scroll down a little further into his letter, he kind of gives away the game a bit, at least. So Andy Jassy says, so we're asking each S-team organization to increase the ratio of individual contributors to managers by at least 15% by the end of Q1 20.
Okay, so I've been through this as well. So Amazon is a bad example as far as like for most organizations. Amazon, and he mentioned it, has a very bad reputation when it comes to things like this. They're still caught up in that like 80s, 90s mentality. They have not brought it to the current era as far as the work mentality. So what they're doing is trying to reduce the amount of management to increase the amount of workers, more work pretty much. Reduce the leadership footprint, bring in more workers for more work to be done. That's kind of a factory mentality, in my opinion.
The tech industry has been carrying out layoffs nonstop for the last year.
We
And
have.
Amazon is a tech company much like any other. Morgan Stanley, the investment bank, published a report on Amazon just recently, which found that by cutting 13,000 manager roles, they could save around $2.1 to $3.6 billion.
Now, see, I'm going to stop it here. That's a huge amount of money savings, but at what cost? And from in my experience, my company has done it before in the past, other companies as well. When you cut all of those jobs, someone has to pick up the slack. So they're pretty much telling us that, okay, we're going to cut out X amount of jobs. The remaining employees will just pick up the slack and work even harder. So it's not not as easy, clear cut as it is compared to the financial aspect of it, to the people aspect. The people pay for it. They may gain financially, but we as employees, we will pay for it.
This idea of like firing people is a huge reason for the return to office movement. And there are big incentives to do it in this way rather than to lay off people directly.
I am so glad I don't work for one of these organizations because they seem to treat their employees like cattle. And, it sucks to say that, but it's the truth. It's the reality. They definitely, it's like they have everyone in a factory. I mean, I can understand it. They're so big, they have to kind of operate that way. But again, at what cost? Money should not be the main driver. You have to consider your people. At least that's my opinion.
But it's not without any consequences, because stealth layoffs have this habit of causing the people who quit to typically be your smartest, your best and brightest, those who actually have better options elsewhere. And the fact that they're willing to do this seems to at least go against the argument that they're trying to drive innovation and better ways of working, because better ways of working are created by your best staff members, who are the ones who are most likely to quit.
This guy gets it. I mean, you're cutting jobs, you're losing your best people, because who in their right mind would want to stay behind and do double the work for less appreciation? I mean, the human factor is the biggest aspect of this whole thing.
The second arm of this return to office movement concerns commercial real estate. If you haven't been keeping track, commercial real estate has been in a bit of a bad place lately. Foreclosures jumped almost 50% in September. The value of commercial real estate has been dropping steadily as people have been evacuating from city centers. And companies are a bit mad about this. Some companies are more mad than others. Amazon bought, just before the pandemic fully kicked off, a brand new building in New York City for $1.15 billion.
So they did that before COVID. So see, this is the main reason. This is the main driver for companies wanting to go back to the office. They're losing a lot of money with these real estate deals that were done before COVID.
Let's be real. Part of the return to office movement is driven by ego as much as anything else. MD offices do just look bad if you're a manager. It's a very visible and like tangible thing to point to.
Yeah, this is, I've visited a couple locations that it does look like that. It's kind of creepy. When you're there, it's like a ghost town. And I'm sure some of you who are working hybrid, when you go into the office, some days it's empty. It's a total ghost town compared to pre-COVID where it was full and lively. But, this is a whole, like just a mountain of trouble, in my opinion, to look at it this way. And it is for a look. A lot of the management teams, they feel like, okay, we need to go back to the office to maintain our culture and to maintain morale, the morale of the team. And no, you don't. You really don't. It's all about ego. And it comes down to micromanaging sometimes too. Some managers cannot manage people well virtually as they can in person, because in person you can truly micromanage someone. You can look over their shoulders all the time and do this, but that's why you have to have good management in place to be able to work in both environments equally.
One presentation was presented to the Chief of Human Resources for the Canadian federal government, and it suggested that they had three options for how to move forward with their work and policy. They could either go mostly on site, they could either go scheduled, which is a prescribed model of hybrid work, or they could go flexible first, which encouraged people to remote work. And this document made a specific recommendation. It actually suggested to the chief of HR that they go for flexible first. It achieved the desired outcome to a great extent. Their own research found that remote work was the best option for them. And yet they decided to not go with it, which is bizarre. It becomes less bizarre when we look at the downsides that they describe of a remote first policy. Specifically two impacts. It's an open secret that businesses that operate downtown would like to see workers back in the office.
Now, see, this is one area that I can feel relate to this whole thing because before COVID, before I started working remotely, and I started about 8, 9 years ago, so it's before COVID. But I definitely enjoyed being able to walk downstairs, leave my building, go walk to a deli or walk to another market or a park. That was awesome working downtown. So I can definitely see how less amount of workers downtown would absolutely affect the economy downtown. That's one of the negatives for sure.
The Canadian Chamber of Commerce, which represents a whole load of Canadian corporations, has been lobbying for the last 2 years to encourage federal workers back into the office. And this has not been done in secret or anything. If you don't know who Doug Ford is, he's the political leader of a Canadian province. And this is a quote from him.
Why are you asking the Prime Minister to call on federal workers to return to the office full time?
Oh, look at his face. He's like, why are you asking me this question? She asked him straight up, why? That's what everyone would like to ask the owners of these companies. Why? Let's hear what he has to say here.
Well, that's pretty simple. You got to get the economy going downtown. These restaurants are hurting. The shops are hurting. Anything to get the economy going and ridership.
There's been like a...
But see, they're focusing on economy versus the well-being of the employees. There should be a balance, and you can achieve that balance. But I think most of the emphasis is being put on the economy, the money.
The second external impact that seemed to drive the Canadian government away from its own recommendation to stick with remote is public perception and scrutiny, which is actually a huge factor. Because if you've made it this far, I presume that you're generally in favor of workers having the choice to be remote or to appear in person. But that's not actually a common sentiment. When it comes to federal workers, a lot of people really, really don't like them. In fact, 6 out of 10 Canadians support a federal return to office mandate.
That is crazy.
Interestingly, around 80% of Canadians think remote work is a good thing when you ask them about themselves. And yet 6 out of 10 seem to support a...
That is so interesting. So the majority of people prefer working from home, but in the poll, 6 out of 10 preferred going back to the office or felt that people should go back to the office. It's so weird. But then it makes you wonder, like, who were they polling? That's the question. Were they polling normal folks like us, the people who are working day in, day out remotely and in the office? Or were they polling people who were specifically office workers? That would be a huge difference. That would matter.
So what if they actually followed the data? What world would that lead to? This one study of federal workers, which was carried out after this return to office mandate, found that in Quebec, the emissions of workers who stayed remote were 64% lower compared to in-person workers. Remote work has this huge outsized benefit on society as a whole because it makes the workplace a lot more inclusive to a huge range of people who might not be able to work otherwise. It allows people with young children to do a full-time job. It allows people who have particular disabilities that may impede their mobility to do a full-time job. And overall, there's clearly just a huge benefit. But that's a very politically unpalatable thing to do. The people who are doing these mandates have their justifications, but they're also human, and therefore they are subject to the same whims all humans are. They're subject to wanting to protect their ego, to wanting to feel like they're the big man in many ways, and can be tempting to think of all corporations as perfectly rational. But as long as they're operated by people, they'll be subject to the whims of people's egos.
Facts. Facts. Great video. Great video. All right, and we are back. So again, great video by Fads. Go check him out, check his channel out. Great channel, a lot of good content. I'm so glad I found that video. Shout out to Fads. I appreciate you for letting me react to your video. But there are a couple of topics that he touched on I definitely think are extremely vital to our group. First thing was the cost savings that companies experience with remote working. I mean, the facts are there. Companies are saving money having people work remotely. The footprint from working in the office, we've got utilities that have to be paid, the spaces have to be cleaned, food has to be provided. There's a lot of things that are being paid for having workers in the office that you're not paying for when they're working remote. So there are huge cost savings happening there across the board. And you'd think that'd be the main driver for having more people work remote, but it's not. But the facts are there, and Fats displayed that perfectly in this video. The biggest part of the video for me, the biggest benefit to this video is pointing out the benefit to coworkers, to us working remotely. There are benefits financially, of course, but the emotional, mental aspect of it is even bigger, in my opinion. The human aspect is more important. Those with anxiety who are not suffering as much working from home compared to the office. There's a lot of stressors working in the office. You've got to deal with the commute. You've got to deal with taking your lunch breaks and breaks during the day and just crunch time and go. Working from home, it's a little more relaxed in terms of you're in your home environment. There's nothing more comforting than that. It's just a whole lot better experience for us as workers working from home, in my opinion. And I'm sure most of you probably agree with that. It's just overall, it's a lot better for us working from home. One interesting point in the video was greed by the corporate, especially the large corporations, just so greedy to try to prioritize money over the well-being of their coworkers. I mean, I'm not surprised about that because as we work in corporate America, so it's always about the money. But sometimes you would hope that they think about the emotional human element to it, but they don't always think about that. So it's interesting how he pointed out companies are using jargon and language to kind of confuse folks to give reasons why they're going back to the office when at the core of it, it's all about money. Of course, always about money. And we're working remotely. It's a cultural shift. It started a long time ago, especially in the technology sphere. COVID kind of kicked that into overdrive. A lot of folks were sent home to work from home, and it kind of carried on after that. We're in the midst of a cultural shift. Some companies, some people, politicians, whatever you want to call it, are trying to take us back to the dark ages in terms of having to work 9 to 5 at an office location. They're missing the larger point here. There's a benefit across the board for working remotely. We're seeing the shift in the culture as far as people prioritizing remote work. I've noticed that by interviewing a lot of people in my company who are looking for remote positions. That's the golden standard now. So it's a cultural shift for remote work, but we do have some resistance that we've got to overcome for sure with the old thinking, always of thinking that are always going to be out there in the shadows. So great video. I really appreciated that. I had to do a reaction to it because it was such great content, such a good video. Share it. When you like it, it spreads it out to other work from home tribe members. There's a lot of us out there. So I want to connect with everyone, build a community for all of us to just interact and talk about these topics. So make sure you like the video, subscribe if you want to stick around. I've got a lot of planned topics coming up. I got a top 10 list of things to do to maintain your mental well-being working from home. We're going to talk about a day in the life of someone who works from home. We'll talk about how to get a remote job, how to keep a remote job, how to maintain stress levels, how to maintain distractions while you're working remotely. Just a whole bunch of topics I'm going to be talking about, again, that I've acquired over the years. I've been working remotely over almost a decade now, so I've got a lot of tips to share, a lot of experience to share with you all, and I look forward to our conversations. So guys, I appreciate you sticking around, and I hope to see all of you back again. I'll be dropping probably 2 videos a week. I'll be talking about work from home topics, of course, and then I'll go out into the world, do a little vlogging to see what it's like for someone who works from home. I'll share some insight into my life with you all, and I hope you share some of yours via comments with me as well. So I appreciate the time, everyone. Have a good rest of your week working from home, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.